be some people to plug some of those gaps, hopefully. There are some more difficult areas in terms of where there's not naturally a body that represents that group, but there was a national policy on it. But yeah, I take your point that there are officers that understand a bit more about pollution control, that have either had some training within their master's programme or otherwise have sort of fall into a bit of a specialism within that field. But I agree, your average DC officer won't have a huge knowledge of pollution control and the related regimes. But generally they've got an environmental health officer who they will listen to because they know they don't particularly understand it. So speak to them instead.
I mean, there's kind of underlying kind of things like that as well. It's kind of highlights kind of idea of reductions in local authorities' budgets and everything. You know, quite often, not like you guys, but I speak to people who aren't even development officers, planning officers. They are people who are working in the department of planning, who are clearly going through all this kind of validation period, checking off reports, and then asking questions about reports because they don't have any understanding of what those reports require and what those reports kind of refer to. So I think there's another kind of problem there with planning.
The sort of vetting process is a whole other beast in terms of issues there, getting an application validated and the delays there and everything else. I understand. I can sympathise with you there. There are difficulties with having a list, and then the problem is that it's a fairly mundane job of going through an application and checking whether all the right documents are there. And it makes sense from a local authority's perspective, money-wise, to pay someone at a relevant scale to do that job. But obviously the difficulties from your side is that they read the title, but beyond that they might not necessarily know the ins and outs of it.
I think my point is that I totally agree that there should be rules, and I think the rules should be clear, and I think there should be more of them. And I think they should have to be formulated to protect public interest. Pollution, obviously, is very important. Noise is very important. Flooding is very important. There should be rules for all these things. The question is, there's so many of these things. Why does every single project have to have a report that proves to a planning officer that doesn't even understand what he's looking at that they comply? How about an element of trust? How about just simply the fact that, if you get in a car and you drive it, you're supposed to follow the speed limit. You don't have a policeman sitting next to you in the car. There aren't enough policemen to check that everyone's always walking. There's an element of trust. This is the law. Let the police follow it. The law is you should not cause noise above a certain number of decibels towards your neighbor. It's not probably very difficult to write that rule. You shouldn't also, in order to build your building, commission someone to do a special report to prove that something is well within the noise limits of any reasonable thing, complies, and then you hand it to someone who doesn't even know what he's reading. It's just layers of bureaucracy that are not actually helping. They're just slowing everybody down, forcing everybody to do things, and making a tremendous amount of work for planning consultants and specialists, because they write report for things that are nowhere near pollution, they're nowhere near floods, they're nowhere near, yet all this stuff's going through the system. That's the
How many people die each year because of speed problems and roads?
About 2,000 per body we wide.
All I was going to say was, for an example of what just been said, change of use from a house in 3 flats back into a house. Building a townscape there, originally a house, obviously. The people now want to convert it back into a house. My planning authority will not accept the application until I've got a ground assessment from the SAC. Change of use, no building, simply taking the partitions away from the staircase and making one flat.
Who is that?
Sorry, so it's a house, 3 flats into one house.
Yeah.
I'll give you a card. You might not actually need planning permission in the first place. But that's a different
Oh,
debate.
well,
I'm sorry, local authority, because this is where it's
You shouldn't.
It depends upon
So
the.
you shouldn't.
There is one particular case that's
I'll feed you on that one. Andy said my local authority, and I know where you live, so that's all right. The local authority in question, you just said,
There's one particular case.
yeah, they,
Went to court.
yes, we went to court and made everybody else do it, and Andy and I seem to have a little history, both of us, of trying to get houses back out of that mire, with some success, I'm pleased to say. Why? Why is it? Why? There is no impact. It's a residential building.
And how do I explain
Before and after.
How do I explain to my poor client living in this house that he's got to spend £1,500 to a specialist to get a report to go with his planning application.
And more to the point, may then have to spend a fortune to bring it up to the standard.
Which is, who's ever going to check it?
Yeah,
No one's ever going to check it.
No,
how,
really,
many,
well-
how many planning officers it take to change a light bulb?
Just to pick up on the point about technical reports a bit more, obviously one of the main issues with these technical reports is they're put in a local list of requirements, yeah, that goes on the website, it applies to everything, and it's not applied flexibly. Yeah? So that what comes in isn't given thought about what is actually necessary. It's a list of requirements. The government is, in theory, looking at this later on this year. Whether they'll get to it with all the other stuff going on, I'm not sure. It was talked about certainly a few months ago, that they were going to look at what the requirements are for submitting a planning application and how onerous they are.
That's where the flexibility comes in, because I'm speaking to your equivalent in my authority, and he says you've got to provide this report before we'll send the application.
We're doing a rather major plan application at the moment.
For us.
Submitted for us.
Major.
For us. Well, yeah, no, major for us. I won't say what the plan application is. But we're currently coordinating 6 specialist reports for a large application which we've been through 2 pre-application processes and paid for them. We've been advised by the council that they won't accept any information once it's submitted. So it'll be, we cannot submit any report past when we click submit. And that if we don't have the determination on the application by March, there's an additional charge being applied by the mayor, which will amount to about £100,000 for our client. So we're in a very tricky situation where we don't have a definitive description of the reports required, albeit we understand from our professional capacity what will be required. That's completely open for interpretation on 6 counts. So whilst we feel confident that we have been through a comprehensive process, we really are at the mercy of planners on a variety of information that they could quite easily turn around and say, well, actually, we're going to, we need this additional information, and they have the right then to sort of ask us to withdraw it, and we end up in a difficult situation. So to some extent, I'm slightly more towards the non.
You better go.
I find it quite difficult to understand how it seems to be.
The approach taken by individual authorities sometimes is nonsense because of the fact that they've decided they're not going to accept any additional documents.
Yeah.
But some authorities still. Some of the things that have happened within local government has been a result of specific decisions by central government. Planning delivery grants was thought to be a wonderful thing. Yeah, so it was 8 weeks or death, basically. You got your decision within 8 weeks, regardless of what it was probably potentially refused if you were still in discussions, or you determined it as submitted, and you didn't enter into any dialogue whatsoever. All that stopped, but the ethos and the kind of culture that it created is still there in a lot of authorities. There's still a lot of authorities that are very keen to be the top performing authority in terms of 8 and 13-week targets. Now, whilst it's a good idea to determine things quickly and meet targets, most people involved in the process, if they were getting to 7 weeks and 6 days, would prefer another week to actually resolve the issue instead of starting the whole process again, potentially paying another fee, or whether it goes under a free go. So that there are certainly issues there about the fact that what's been created is a culture of you must determine it within those timescales, irrespective of any other common sense. And there needs to be more of a move away from those things, because the authority doesn't get any more money from it. They used to. And that was what created it. It was literally, you had to determine it within those times. If you didn't achieve that target, you were talking potentially £100,000, potentially as much as £500,000 for that particular authority for not achieving certain things, certain targets. But the problem is that all of that baggage still remains. The money still comes, the money actually now comes in the form of a new homes bonus. So you get sort of 6 years' worth of council tax for each completion effectively of housing, which is the idea of sort of carrot and the stick sort of saga. But I can sympathise with you, particularly with authorities that aren't willing to talk to you. That's one of the biggest issues at the moment, is that, which is why I say that the idea isn't necessarily, it's not the controls that are necessarily the problem, it's how they're wielded. It's the fact that actually the development management approach, which people talk about but do little of, is actually more about sort of talking and communicating with one another and deciding things. Just to pick up on a point earlier about the fact that planning officers are often non-committal, particularly sort of more junior officers. The problem is that they're trained to be non-committal because of the fact that they know whatever they say is subject to their boss's sign-off. So I've got delegated authority for Enfield, so I can make quite strong statements because I know that ultimately it will be me plus a colleague signing it off. But they can't necessarily do that. They're also then covered by another layer of things, which is that every decision that I make under my delegated powers is delegated from planning committee. So planning committee can call in any one of those developments